Task 20. Task 20 is, I think, one of the easier tasks on a test. This is an opportunity, again, like task 16 and 17, to some extent maybe 18 and 19 for sure, to get your examiner involved in the test. So the examiner is your student. So the examiner is your student, and when I turn during the course of this, when I start to actually give you the task, how I would do it, I'm going to turn towards the camera, and of course you're going to be a long ways from me so you can see the loops, but you're going to assume you're pretty close, and then I'm going to ask you a question and you can just answer it like you're the examiner. This asks about timing, which is fundamentally a pause. How much pause do you have in the front and have in the back? And so the idea is that you want to be able to teach a student the proper pause. Too short a pause, too long a pause, and fundamentally the bottom line to these pauses, and the issue with the pause that's not correct, is that you're creating slack. And so that's really the principle here that's involved in a pause. Too long a pause, you got slack because your line dips. Too short a pause, you have slack because your line hasn't straightened out yet. So in either case, your rod is going to move a long way through the casting arc before it actually gets tension on the fly. And both of those two things, too long or too short, are going to cause problems. So I'm just going to start off, I'm going to play like you're the examiner, and you're going to just follow along with me, pretend you're the examiner, and see from your point of view what this task looks like. What I'm going to do is teach you a little bit about pause, which is timing. What's your proper timing? How long do you pause in the front and the back on two casting strokes? And the problem with too long and too short a pause. Remember too that as your line gets longer, and we're going to discuss this in a minute, but just as a preview, as your line gets longer, you have to pause longer because the fly takes longer to unroll. So our idea here is to unroll the fly before we start our next casting stroke. And to do that, we need to be aware of where our fly is. So I'm going to show you good pause, proper, correct pause. So this would be correct pause. Just as a fly extends, or just before it extends, you start your next stroke, your next casting stroke. This is too long a pause. And you can see what that causes is a big wider loop. And this is too short a pause. And if I tried to make a cast from here, it's just going to dump. So what I'd like you to do right now, I'm going to make different pauses, and I want you to tell me what it is. Is it a proper pause, too long a pause, or too short a pause? So here we go. Identify this one for me. Good. You said too long a pause. Now identify this one. Good. You said just right. So that's just right. That's the Goldilocks pause. Now here's the next one. Again, too short a pause. So remember, as the line gets longer, you're going to have to pause longer and longer. As the line gets shorter, you're going to pause shorter and shorter because it takes less time for that fly to get out to the fullest extension. So let's talk a little bit about how you can correct some of these pauses. If I had a student who was pausing too short, in other words, they were doing this, you've got a couple options. One is make sure first off that they have enough energy, enough force, acceleration that they can actually move their fly all the way to the front, because sometimes what's happening is they're just doing this. I'm exaggerating it, but there's no way, even if they pause properly, they're going to get a straight line. So what I want to do in this case is I'm going to have them first off just start false casting and telling them to give it more power, more acceleration. Once they've given it more acceleration, and they'll still be might doing this, but at least I know it's not an acceleration problem. Now I would tell them, look, what I want you to do is I just want you to watch that yarn. Don't start again until that yarn is down. I'll not even yell at them. Yeah, now, now, now. There's one other thing I do quite frequently. A student goes to cast and I'll grab their rod. I'll warn them first. I'll say, look, I'm going to grab your rod and hold it for just a split second. So basically what they're doing is, I'll try to do it off of this shoulder so you can kind of see it. What I'm going to do is, if they're doing this, I'll just grab their rod and hold it for a second. Got the wind blowing a weird way here, so it's kind of weird. But that's what I'll do. So that's a good way of doing it. And then just watching. And the other thing you can do is have a person close their eyes. I've done this quite a bit. They close their eyes and are doing this. And I'll just say, don't start your next stroke, your next casting stroke, unless I say now. Now, 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 now. And you should say, if you're going to do that one, say now just a tad bit before they start, before that thing unrolls, because it takes just a millisecond for it to register in their brain and get to their hand. So if you wait and say now after the yarn is completely extended, what's going to happen is it's going to be a little bit late. What about the one where when they're pausing too long? Again, make sure that they've got adequate line speed to get a straight loop. If they're doing this, it doesn't matter. They're going to have a big droop anyway. So because the line just doesn't have enough speed to stay straight. So make sure they have enough line speed. And then the next thing I would do, if they're in this position here, you can stand with a noodle. When they come back, I'll just push it forward. When they come forward, I'll push it back. The other thing you can do is tell them, look, what I want you to do is, with a second, again, go back to the same thing. Watch the yarn. Watch the yarn. Now. Now, now, now. So those two things I found very helpful. Also feel again. Have them close their eyes and try it with their eyes closed. So those are the things I would do for somebody who's having trouble with or improper pause, whether it's too long or too short. So that took about 5.5 minutes. Now, if you were actually with an examiner, what I would have done is ask one of the examiners to be the student. What I'd like you to do, Mr. Examiner, Miss Examiner, Mrs. Examiner, is I'd like you to have too long a pause and let me demonstrate how I would correct that. Or too short a pause and let me demonstrate how I would correct that. Therefore, again, you've involved your examiner again, and they're actually becoming part of the solution. The same thing with the basically back on cast 18. You could have done the same thing on 18 with a tailing loop. You can demonstrate the tailing loop, and then you could ask the examiner, hey, why don't you do the tailing loop, and I'll try to show you how I would correct it. Anytime you can do that, that's fine. Now, some examiners aren't interested. They don't care about being included in the exam. They just want to know what you would do. They don't want you to show them what you would do. So it's the same kind of issue we talked about before we started task 16.